Hello everyone, and welcome back to my channel. I'm Luchike Styles, and in today's tutorial I'll be sharing with you the detailed process from the drafting to the cutting and to the sewing of this beautiful pencil skirt which you see right here. So this skirt can actually be worn in two different ways depending on your mood and the type of vibe you are willing to give out. So it can be worn in a longer version or in a shorter version, and you can as well go ahead to actually show some skin, or you can decide to cover up entirely. So this is all I'll be sharing with you all in today's tutorial, and trust me, if this sounds like something you're really interested in learning how to do, continue watching, and I urge you not to skip any part of this tutorial. So without much ado guys, we're just going to dive right into what we have for today. So this is a multicolored crepe flowered fabric, and I have 2 yards and 1 yard of it. So the 1 yard will be for the upper part or the blouse of for this skirt, and these 2 yards I have right here, I used it in the making of this skirt, though I didn't end up using everything. Okay, so but this I have right here is 2 yards of crepe fabric, and this fabric is slightly stretchy. It stretches a bit. Okay, so here are my working tools. I have my scissors, my pin, I also have my stretch ruler and my curve rule. So the next thing I'm going to start doing now is to fold my fabric into two. So I'm going to fold from one of these border and fold into two. So if you want to fold your fabric into two, you have to measure the largest part of your body, and because this is a skirt, so you have to measure your hip circumference before you fold your fabric into two. So when you measure your hip circumference, you divide it by 4 and you add extra 1 inch to that, which is going to serve as your stitching allowance before you go ahead to pin, just the same way I'm doing right here. So now I've pinned in order for me to have my fabric at a place, and you can see that it stretches a bit. I'm going to start imputing my measurements, but firstly I have to mark a line across at that top part because it's going to be my starting line. Okay, and this first line I drew at the top part of my fabric is going to be my waistline. So all my measurements are going to be starting exactly from that line. I hope you can see this because this fabric is really multicolored, right? So now from the folded edge of my fabric, I started marking 1 inch. So I'm going to mark this 1 inch until I get to the ends of my fabric. Today's gonna be a good day. Wake up. Today's gonna be a good day. Wake up. Today's gonna be a good day. I'm just going to simply start imputing my body measurement. So I'll be adding or fixing a band to my skirt of 1.5 inches. Basically, when I'm going to impute all my measurements right here, I'm going to minus 1.5 inches, which is actually for the height of my band. So that 1.5 inches, I placed it on that first line on my fabric, which I already told you will be my waistline. So I got my 9 inches, which is my hip length. Okay, so now the next thing I'm going to do is that on that line, I'm basically going to divide my waist circumference by 4, and I'm going to mark the quarter of my waist measurements on that first line, exactly on that line. So my waist circumference divided by 4 is 8 inches. So I'll add extra half of an inch for stitching allowance because this fabric is stretchy, just like I said earlier. So when I'm putting my vertical measurements, I made sure that I started from that 1 inch line from the folded edge of my fabric. Okay, so I didn't start exactly from the folded edge, I started from that 1 inch line which I marked from the folded edge of my fabric. So the next is to impute my hip circumference. So I'll divide my hip circumference by 4, and I had 9 3/4 inches, and of course I started marking this from this 1 inch line which I marked from the folded edge of my fabric. If you look properly, you understand what I mean. So having made that point there and also added half of an inch for my stitching allowance, I went ahead now to use my curve rule to connect the point I have on my waistline all the way down to my hip line. So now the next thing is to actually impute the length of my skirt. So remember, I'm subtracting 1.5 inches from my horizontal measurements right here. So I placed that 1.5 inches on that first line, which is my waistline, and I firstly went ahead to mark 30 inches. This is because my table is quite short to accommodate the length of my skirt, which is actually 42 inches. So I placed my tape on that 30 inches and now got my 42 inches. So it was just serving as a guide for me. Okay, So when I got 42 inches, which is the length of my skirt, I went ahead to cut off the excesses I had at the sides. Please do note that I'm yet to shape the lower part of my skirt. So I did this so that I can work with this fabric alone, because it was slipping off my table. Okay, so now it's time to shape my skirt. I measured what I had on my hip circumference. Altogether I had 10¼ inches. So I measured from that point where I have my chalk mark to that 1 inch points from the folded edge of my fabric. Okay, so I had 10¼ so I'm just going to subtract 1.5 inches from that and now mark it at the hem of my skirt. So when I marked the length of my skirt of 42 inches, I also added 1.5 inches for hemming allowance, and for the width or wideness of the hem of my skirts, I subtracted 1.5 inches from what I have on my hip circumference. I hope it's clear, right? So now I just made a connection from that my hip line, or from that my hip point, all the way down to the point which I created at the hem of this my skirt. So after that, now I'll go ahead and cut off, and this is what I have. So when I'm cutting off for the waistline area, I have to leave about 1/2 inch, which is going to serve as a joining allowance to the band of our skirt. So after that, now I went ahead now to pin this my fabric together, because it was actually very slippery, like very. So I had to do this so that it doesn't slip off and I don't make mistakes at the end of the day. So after that, now I'm just simply going to get the remnants of my fabric and I'm going to fold it into two. So by the time I fold this into two, I'm going to get the front part of my skirt and place it to trace out the back part of my skirt. But while doing this, I'll make sure that this 1 inch which I marked from the folded edge of my fabric is placed outside. Like, I'll make sure that that 1 inch is not inclusive in this back part of my skirt. So you can see that I placed it outside of my folded fabric for the back part of my skirt. So that is the only thing that I'm doing right here. So I'll go ahead now and trace out the waist and the sides and also the hem. So I'm not fixing a zipper to the back, neither am I fixing it to the front part of my skirt. My zipper will be fixed to the sides of my skirt. So that is the reason I am not adding any zip allowance to the back part or the front part of my skirt. Okay, so after cutting out the back part, this is what it looks like, and it's also a dartless skirt. So just bear all of this in mind. All right, so now this is the front part of my skirt, and I'm just arranging this properly to ensure everything aligns. So the next now I'm going to do is that from the folded edge, from that folded part, okay, I marked 5 inches. So this time around I didn't start from that 1 inch line, from the extreme end of my folded fabric. Okay, so this is where I'm now marking this 5 inches inward. All right, so I'll mark it to the end or the hem of this my skirt. So when I do this now, I'm going to cut this through. Please, you only cut one piece of this, you don't cut the two sides. All right, so you can see I am only cutting one piece of it. I'm not cutting these two. So I didn't separate this to cut out because I might find it a bit difficult to fold back because of the nature of my fabric. Okay, so you can see it's only one piece or side of this skirt that I cut open. You should also do the same, please. All right, so that aside, now the next thing is to cut for my band, which I'll be fixing to my skirt. So firstly, I went ahead to fold my fabric into two. Then from the top part, I'll now fold in again. So when I folded this into two, I divided my waist circumference of 32 inches into two. So what I had was 16 inches, and I added extra 3 inches to that. Altogether I had 19 inches, right? So I folded again from the top part, and I'm going to measure my waist circumference divided by 2. So like I said, my waist circumference is 32 divided by 2 is 16 inches. I added extra 3 inches to that for allowance. Okay, though we will still cut off the excesses at the end of the day when we are done sewing. So it's better you have enough allowance than being short of your fabric while sewing. So now for the height of this my band, remember I told you all that I'll be fixing a band of 1.5 inches to this my skirt. So now if I'm to mark 1.5 inches, I need to add extra allowance for stitching, right? So now at this point altogether I marked 2.5 inches as the height of my band, because by the time I stitch using half of an inch at both parts of this my band, I'll arrive at exactly 1.5 inches. So after cutting this out, now you can see I have 2 bands altogether. So now I'm going to go back to the front part of my skirt so that I can start sewing. So now I unpin this piece I have left on my fabric, and by the time you unpin this piece, the straight parts, you know, the smaller parts which I slashed, right? So you're going to get it now, the straight part and not the curved part, and place it exactly on the straight part of the bigger piece of your skirt, just the same way I'm doing right here. So I believe this is not confusing at all. Like, it's very clear. What I'm doing here is very clear. So the straight part on the straight part on this smaller piece of your skirt, you place it on the straight part on the bigger piece of your skirt, just this way. So now you're going to take the measurement of where you want your slit to stop. If you want your slit very high, you can go ahead and do that. But for me, from my waist, I marked my slit of 24 inches at that point right there. So this basically means that I am going to stitch. So you are going to also start marking 1 inch inwardly this way, okay, inwardly this way, and I will now stitch from the top part and stop exactly on that 24 inches and double stitch right there. All right. So now the next I went ahead to do is to cut out this piece which is long, and you're just going to fold it so that you can have a neat finishing. So by the time I stitched up to that my slit point of 24 inches, I ironed my seam open, as you can see right here. So at both edges where I ironed open, I ran a very straight stitch to the end at both ends, and this is the rope which I told you all to fold in twice and you stitch it up, okay? And for the length I had 28 inches. I didn't measure it out, so this is for our drawstring, okay? So I didn't measure it out. This was when I was measuring it out on fold. I had 28 inches, meaning if I don't have it on fold, it's going to be around 50 something inches, right? So now from that my slit upward, I just marked half of an inch. Please pay proper attention to what I'm doing right here, okay? So now on that half of an inch point, I'm just going to raise just that piece up. Make sure it doesn't affect the right side of your fabric or your skirt. So this might sound a little bit difficult, but trust me, it's not. So make sure you only raise this part of your fabric, and you now make a very tiny cut right there. Make sure that the cut doesn't get to the front or the right side of your skirt, okay? Please be very careful at this point while you are doing this. So just make a little cut so that it doesn't affect this part, just the same way mine didn't affect it. You need to be really very careful. So now you're going to now get your safety pin, and you now pin this your rope and now pass it through this channel, because this is basically like a channel now that I've created right here, so that this my rope can pass through. All right. So remember, after stitching, you iron your seam open, and at both sides of the seam you ironed open, you are going to stitch this straight down to the end or the hem of your skirt, okay, before you start passing your rope through. So when you pass it through from one channel, it will come out of the waist area. You now pass it through to the other side of the channel already created. So this is what I have after doing this, as you can see right here. And while you drag or draw this, you will see the effect which I'm going to have. So you can actually decide to knot this so that at some point you don't have your rope go inside of your dress, okay? But it's totally optional. If your rope is long enough, it's never going to go inside your dress, okay, or the channel is created. So after that, now I now drag this a bit so you can see what it's looking like already. So that is it, and I'll just get the back part of my skirt, and I'm going to place them right sides facing this front part of my skirt, because at this point I have to start joining the front and the back part of my skirt. So I'll place them right side, making sure that every part aligns. Make sure you don't mistake or misplace the hem part for the waist. So make sure that they both align. So the curve on your hip is actually going to help you to identify the part which is for the waist area and the hem as well. So after placing this, you go ahead and pin this all the way through to the ends or the hem of your skirt. Then I gave this half of an inch sewing allowance, but I'm going to stitch with 3/4 of an inch from the waist down to the hem. Reason is because this fabric is stretchy. So now for this other side, I'll be fixing my zipper. So all I did was to mark 7 inches from my waist downwards. So I made a mark right there. So the part that I'll start stitching now is from that 7 inches all the way to the ends using 3/4 of an inch. So I've done that. I've stitched the both sides, and you can see that one part is entirely closed and the other part is open due to that 7 inches I left, which is where I'll be fixing my zipper, as you can see right here. So the next is to get my band. I'll get just one band, and I'm going to place it now on the waist area of my skirt. So I'm going to place this band right side, facing the right side of my skirt. So this is like the two right sides are on each other or meeting each other. Okay, so I'll now go ahead and pin this all around on the waist area, as you can see I'm doing right here. So after pinning, you just have to go ahead and stitch on the waist area by 1/2 of an inch. So just pay proper attention to the explanation I'm giving right here. Stitch all around this, all around to the other side using just 1/2 of an inch. So by the time you are done stitching with 1/2 of an inch, you are just going to raise your band up this way. Okay, so you now turn it this way, so it's going to be up, as you can see what I'm showing you right here. So you now get your zipper, and you now have to fix your zipper. Make sure you mark 3/4 of an inch, which was the stitching allowance you use in stitching your skirt, whether it's 1 inch, whether it's 1/2 inch, whether it's 3/4 of an inch, but whichever inches you used in stitching or shaping your skirt, make sure that's what you mark before you fix your zipper. So your zipper should be stitched from the band all the way down to the points where you started shaping. Okay, so I did that, and this is what I have. So after that, I measured my waist circumference. So you can see right there I have 16 inches. So I fixed my zipper. I opted for this brown one because at that point I fixed my zipper, I had more of brown color flowers around there. Okay, so after that, now you just open up your zipper this way and get your second band. Now at the top part of your first band, right sides facing each other, you are going to pin your second band to it, and you now stitch all around using just 1/2 of an inch. So when you get to the zipper area, make sure that your zipper is resting on the right side of your first band, just this way. So you now stitch and now stitch straight. Okay, so when you stitch, you now stitch straight this way, but on top of this second band. Okay, so do it for the two parts of your zipper, and also go ahead and hem the ends of your skirt. So I added 1.5 inches as my hemming allowance, so I'll go ahead and do all of that. And this is what I have. I've hemmed my skirt, and this is what I have after fixing my second band. So when you are done fixing, this is what it's going to look like. It's still looking tacky, it's not looking nice at all. So there are actually two ways you can go about achieving a neat band. So it's either you go ahead and fold in 1/2 inch all around on that second band, or you can go ahead and weave the rough part of this second band. Then at the center or at the middle of this, by the time you raise this, the second band up, okay, so in between that place, you can now fix your hemming gum and iron, and you have a neat finish. sheen. So this is all I did, and I ended up achieving this beautiful skirt which you see right here. So you can actually wear it in a longer version or in a shorter version depending on your preference, your mood, or the vibe you're trying to give out. Okay, so this is how simple it is to actually cut, draft, sew this skirt you see right here. And I hope you found this tutorial very helpful. Thank you all so much for watching. To all my subscribers, if you're yet to subscribe, I urge you to please do subscribe to my channel, and it's never going to be a thing of regret. Thank you all so much, and I'll see you all in my next one. Do have a wonderful time ahead of you. Bye.
Step 1, wake up early, gonna rise with the sun. Step 2, get some good, some food in you. Step 3, think real hard about what you wanna be.